Hey all, I have one of the best in the business today in macroeconomics, geopolitics, strategy, etc. It's Simon Hunt, who I last interviewed in Dubai. I think it was March 24, and here he is with the latest on what's happening in the world and what's going to happen. Simon, great to see you again. Let's talk about what was your base case, which was 2025 being
Oof.
problematic.
Problematic is an understatement. I mean, when you look at the soft data in America, America's basically been in recession since October last year. One of the reasons is that the official CPI is seriously understated. And that's been a deliberate policy ever since Arthur Burns in the 1970s. So if you actually work through, as a guy called Larry, as John Williams does, real CPI last year was 10.8%. Now, Larry Summers took all the reporting data back to 1983, and he officially said inflation in 2024 was 9%. Well, retail sales officially rose by 3%. CPI officially rose by 3%. So in real terms, retail sales went nowhere. But if you adjusted for a sensible level of inflation, they were down and down big. And why is it that so many working families, including immigrants who've lived in America a number of years, basically went from voting Democrats to voting Republicans because the households knew what real inflation was? So again, you've got the employment numbers being heavily manipulated. So really, America is already in recession and has been. And you can see the soft data now coming through, which is confirming it. And we will probably see it coming through into the hard data in the second quarter. So
Right.
then we have the tariff earthquake, which has basically upended the global trading system. Even if this was an intentional operation by Trump, nonetheless, the reverberations are and will continue to be enormous. And too many people say, oh, this just disappears. Well, it doesn't. The disruptions in the logistical supply chains will take months, if not years, for them to be recalibrated. So we would suggest that the world will be in recession this year. It will last, all things working out successfully. It will bottom out early next year. But then we have on top of, and what I should also add, is we have an extraordinarily fragile financial system in America. And you can see it by the reverberations that have appeared in the bond market. And that is really Trump's Achilles heel, because the bond market is sensing that tariffs are going to be inflationary and that growth is going to slow, which equals stagflation. And then we've got what is clearly a trade war between China and America. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, is openly saying our policies are to isolate China in the world, and therefore policy is to curtail China's ability to grow. The real worry in Washington is that China's applications of automation and robotics on an already highly efficient manufacturing supply chain will result in China's ability to produce goods in quantities and at prices that nobody else can compete with. And if that were the case in an open trading world, it would mean that Trump's ability to refurbish America's manufacturing sector would be just sent to the wall. And I'll give you one example. In China, there is a company amongst several others, but one which I do know about, where there is not one human being on the shop floor, producing one smartphone every minute. What do you see in America? So there are very deep divisions going on, which leads us to not only a fragile financial system, not only to a world that will be in recession, but to a geopolitical world that is changing rapidly. Tensions, what I've just been focusing on in the last couple of days is what's going to happen to the negotiations, or should I say discussions, that are taking place between Iran and America. Professor Sachs gave a most brilliant speech at a diplomatic forum in Turkey, I think it was last weekend, in which he said that in 2001, the CIA and Israel set out the groundwork for 7 wars in the Middle East, which Israel would perpetrate. We've had 6. There is 1 remaining, Iran. Now, there is a general feeling that there will be a negotiated settlement. But for that to happen, Trump has not only got to swallow his pride, but he's got to go back on the big demands that he officially made in February this year. Not only should Iran have all of its nuclear enrichment processes dismantled. Iran should dismantle all of its ballistic missile capability and stocks. Iran should give up supporting the axis of resistance. In other words, what Trump is demanding is the end of Iran as a sovereign state, and that he, President Trump, could walk into Iran tomorrow unmolested, undefended, and cause regime change, which, of course, regime change is being pushed by the Shah's son who lives in Virginia. But we have Iran, China, and Russia having joint discussions all the time on how Iran should react to America's demands. Before the Oman meeting, the three countries were talking in Beijing. After the Oman meeting, they were or are still in Moscow. So this is ongoing discussions. But the real, how can I say it? The real big sword is that the United Nations on the 17th of June is calling for the establishment of the state of Palestine, which would then make it the 184th member country. So, whenever such questions have come up, America has always vetoed the resolution. The question is, will Trump continue to veto a resolution creating a state of Palestine? Or will he have garnered enough support within his cabinet and within his party to support that resolution? I think the result is a toss of the coin. But then, so at the next talks, I think they will fail, but Iran will go back. The Iranian delegation will go back to Iran and will sit tight, do nothing, because they know the resolution is coming up in a few weeks' time. The question is then, how will Netanyahu and his right-wing colleagues react, knowing that in the middle of June, there will be this resolution before the United Nations? Either they will preempt by attacking Iran. If that happened, Iran will retaliate and will destroy key infrastructure in Israel. The question then is, Netanyahu will go running to Washington. You've got to help us. You've got to save us. What will Trump do? Either he will be enjoined with Israel, or else somehow or another, Netanyahu will be paid off. So all I'm saying is that the outcome of these current negotiations are extremely important, not only for the region, but for the world and for global financial markets. Just to add to that risk, informed people are saying that various European governments are going to support Ukraine with troops on the ground and military equipment. I know, but they're so desperate. They're delusional. They're delusional because they know if they put troops and equipment on the ground, it's war with Russia. And in their delusional thinking, they think that they can defeat Russia. So there's my background.
Excellent, Simon. And again, just to stress for the listeners, we're talking financial today mainly, but this is, as you mentioned, Simon, absolutely crucial. Now, the EU or the EU Commission could have a secret trump card. They could have a trans army, which has never been tried before, which could beat Russia. A trans sex army, with blue hair and men in frocks. It could work. But yeah, the EU has gone insane, and we see in Ireland the mass migration disaster befalling us, and all around Europe, the war on farmers. The EU Commission at this stage is an absolute drug-crazed Politburo from the Soviet era. It's insane. So I'm going to watch that with interest. But this Iran thing, in terms of Trump, I'm not an expert in this, but my impression, my intuition from all of what I'm watching and kind of analysing, Trump seems to be utterly under the thumb of the Zionist kind of sector, the Netanyahu and the merry men. He seems to be very much under the thumb with the moves he's made, the laws he's brought in. But you reckon he could have the power independently to actually negotiate with Netanyahu and the rest and possibly force them into a compromise?
I did say he would be either he supports an attack on Iran, which basically nobody wants except for Netanyahu, or he finds a way of paying off Netanyahu. Don't ask me how. His family, Netanyahu's family, live in Florida.
Okay, so again, behind the scenes, God knows what
Behind
there
the
is.
scenes, something could happen.
And
But
Netanyahu could.
it still comes back. The risk is there, and the risk is not priced into markets, just as the risk of European countries supporting Ukraine is not priced in. I mean, that is a view of somebody who, I can't name him, who practically never gets these sort of things wrong.
So if these scenarios that you describe, Simon, if they get a bit kinetic, whether Ukraine, even though it's hard to imagine the EU having the idiocy to try that, or indeed Iran, which is really in the crosshairs, if these get hot, the markets are going to get an absolute bruising.
Correct.
And recently, I think it's Peter Schiff. He's having his day in the sun now with gold in the stratosphere. But he was saying that this bubble in America, if we teeter back a little towards the financial specifically, this enormous inflated bubble with the massive liquidity and zero interest rates and tech bubble, it yada yada, building, it's just absurd. And the debt is just colossal in America. He was kind of saying that the tariff is just the pin that pricks the balloon, but the balloon, swollen balloon, is the problem. So in a sense, is the tariffs just bringing forward a natural deflation of the bubble that just has to occur?
It's the catalyst.
Mm.
Yeah. I
And
mean, I think that this whole tech sector, with all the big names like Nvidia, they will trade in very volatile fashions, but still have a long, long way to fall. And I think I think DeepSync has actually upended this spend money, create data center capacity is the only way forward. Has really been dashed on the head. And I think we're going to see, as markets get more volatile and the outlook gets more complicated, that these planned expansions and massive capital expenditure are going to be cut back very significantly. Very interestingly, one of the biggest bulls in the market, Goldman Sachs, recently came out with a report pouring a bit of cold water. I said a bit of cold water on this bull market. So I think, even the bulls are beginning to ask questions.
That's very important to note. Absolutely. I've been seeing from a few quarters similar things. They're finally beginning to acknowledge what appears to be a blatant reality. Now, I got out of the market largely in a big chunk of pension a couple of years ago. You could say a bit early, but then again, Buffett was also beginning a couple of years ago. So better early than too late. And last year, I made a major shift of other pension funds out of the market too. So I moved quite a lot into physical gold, and my followers deal with pure gold in London. Well, worked out very well for a lot of people. But gold now has shot up. Now that's an indication of everything we're talking about, on top of the central bank mega stockpiling for the last several years. But is gold now, do you think, it's hard to call, is it going to level off and then go forward up and up and up in the coming decade, which I'd expect? Or do you think gold could correct? It's a little bit of a debate at the moment. Could it correct down to the mid 2000s and find a floor and then a springboard up in the coming years? Or what's your thoughts?
I think that is the likely outcome. Whether it's at 3.5 or 3.8, I don't know. But then I think gold does correct down to around 2,500. I mean, at these prices, jewelry demand must be shot to bits. Point one. Point two, if you're a big buyer, you want a correction. And there is a big buyer. It's America.
Now,
Because, because I understand that America's gold, 8,300 odd tons, is still in Fort Knox, but it had been leased out, hypothecated, etc. So they're getting all of that back. And I heard whatever you might call it, a whisper that actually they want more, maybe another 2,000 tons. Because there's all this chatter that Trump is going to have a accord at his Florida estate on July the 4th, hoping to get most of the world around the table. But will Russia and China go? Doubtful. But so the chatter goes, what he's looking for is a dollar that will be supported by Bitcoin and gold. I know. That's the chatter I've just been reading about. But I think that remember that in May, there is the BRICS summit meeting. I suspect, and listening to comments that Lavrov has made, Russia's foreign secretary, I suspect that the Sherpas, the BRICS Sherpas, are working overtime to conclude policies on finance, trade, and currencies, implying that they could be announcing their own new currency. And I think this is Simon Hunt's speculation, so it's that only and nobody else's. Well, it's not something that anybody else has said to me. So it's my own thinking, which is that the BRICS currency will be the Hong Kong dollar. Because China has up to somewhere between 1 and 2 trillion US dollars sitting in Hong Kong banks in Singapore. It's not too far-fetched to think that the Chinese currency, the CNY, will converge with the Hong Kong dollar.
Hey guys, just a quick interlude here before we get back to Simon, seeing as we're talking about physical gold. I believe I've been saying this for many years now, how crucial it is to have a portion of your portfolio, pension, whatever, in physical gold, especially the way the world is going. So whether you want to move on this quickly or try and speculate and wait for a potential correction, as Simon, muses about, completely up to you, of course. But do contact the guys in Pure Gold. The link here will get you some free storage and a free consultation. They'll be very aware, beyond us even, of all of what is going on in the coming markets and the coming years in physical precious metal. So anyway, just an idea. Have the conversation, get the free consultation, and think about how you are going to hedge against the various kind of craziness that is coming our way in the next few years. So best of luck.
And I have always thought for 2 or 3 years that the day will come when Beijing will announce that its currency is supported by the gold which its citizens own, which comes to about 25,000 tons. If you can calculate how much has been taken off the Shanghai Gold Exchange since its inception in 2002.
And
That would be a very acceptable currency. The Hong Kong dollar is acceptable globally.
in,
So
indeed,
think of Russia has a surfeit of Indian rupees. They'll switch them into Hong Kong dollars.
and then the Hong Kong dollar gets sanctioned, of course. But yes, you told a story as well in Dubai when we met about a tour you got from a senior kind of military person into warehouses with physical gold.
Oh, yeah. That 25,000 tons is only the gold of the citizen zone. China's government, through the different ministries, including the PLA, have another 25 odd thousand tons, with the PLA being a big holder, as I told you.
Yeah, and someone brought you into a warehouse and basically floor to ceiling, it was packed. So China's betting on gold in a big way. The BRICS are rising, and America's path forward is war, either trade war with China or kinetic wars, of course, and proxy wars. Do you think then America is confident it can navigate the coming years, this craziness that's going on? Or is it like, the 50-50 coin toss, do you think, of the administration, that they're going to give it a go, all to play for, but have serious concerns that this war with the BRICS may not pan out as they desire?
I think they're operating on the principle or on the thinking that we are still the most powerful country in the world. We have the largest consumer market in the world, and therefore everybody needs us. But against that, how has that biggest consumer market in the world been financed? Through debt. I'm pretty sure that part of the bond upheaval last week was caused by China selling some of its bonds. So it receives dollars and then selling those dollars. But also what the Trump camp is miscalculating is that China will succeed in encouraging its households who have savings last year totaling $4.5 trillion to start spending more, because the government will be introducing reforms to healthcare, pensions, etc., which will encourage households to spend rather than save. And as a friend of mine in China at the moment said, it's everybody to the battleground. In other words, it's a call for arms against the enemy. So please spend a bit more and save a bit less. And this is how we will help you to do it. And interestingly, another friend who is a scientist, works for a big German company, is in Shanghai and went to the annual tech show. He emailed me to say there is practically nothing in the tech world that China cannot now produce.
And
So I think there is a misapprehension within the Trump's advisory camp on how the extent to which the extent to which China and the rest of Asia can respond to America's exceptionalism. The whole of Asia, households have large savings. These countries can see how unstable America is, and will they then band around Big Brother in Asia, namely China? So I think some very, very interesting developments.
yeah, and you would have to say, Simon, that they'd be right to do so. I mean, we all criticize the Chinese regime because it's essentially totalitarian, etc. But I mean, the lesser of enemies. I mean, for people over in Asia and for BRICS people, they'd better start getting together somewhat, or they'll really get screwed, as the USA. Yeah. So thinking of all of that, and there's so many uncertainties, of course, but let's say in a scenario where Europe doesn't necessarily get in a kinetic war with its trans armies with Russia, but there is high tension that develops in the coming year or so. And let's say that there isn't an outright war with Iran, but tensions increase palpably and it becomes more of a news item. And negotiations with Netanyahu don't go so well. And the influence that he and his cronies have on America bears out and forces pressure on Iran in some manner that kind of hits the headlines more than it currently is. In that kind of scenario of strife, where might you see the stock market or the S&P going in the next year or so in that scenario, given, as we've said, it's already in a mega bubble?
Our base case, and I'll give you the alternative in a minute. Our base case is that later this year, the Fed is forced to support the bond market with a $2 trillion infusion, that interest rates come down, taxes come down, and deregulation policies are put in place sometime in the third quarter. Then we have an inflation-driven recovery globally, because other central banks will follow suit. I'll talk about China later. That recovery hopefully lasts into late 2027, but it forces inflation up into double-digit figures in America and globally, which means that the bond vigilantes will want to see 10-year treasuries and 20 and 30-year treasuries in double digits. So what does that do to a highly leveraged system? Crash time. That's our base case. But the alternative case is that we are basically remain in recession until 2028, and the wheels come off the system, which means that equities, volatile, but trending down. In our base case, I should have said, we get a low in equities early next year or end this year. And then we have a typical inflation-driven boom followed by a collapse. That goes for equities and commodities like base metals.
Okay, so the base case, as you described, firstly, that would be a low in equities maybe at the end of the year,
Correct.
and then an inflationary crack up kind of boom of the markets up until around 27, 28, and then elevator down.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And the alternative, maybe we'll just parse out, the alternative is the powers that be don't particularly want that scenario. So things occur that we struggle along in the equities markets, bumble along in a longish term recessionary environment until what happens?
Then the wheels come off the system.
The wheels come off, maybe in 27, 28.
2028.
Okay, so they both kind of head towards 27,
Yeah,
28
absolutely.
elevator.
How we get there is two ways. And our base case is the inflation route.
Which involves a hump up from 25 up to 27. Well, maybe a low at the end of the year, then a hump up, inflationary hump in equities values.
Basically,
And then,
taking the S&P as an example, by late 2027, doubling.
ooh,
Take copper as an example in base metals, doubling. I mean, copper, we go down to 7,000 by early next year, and then doubling.
and in those two scenarios, base case and struggling recession with an eventual kind of collapse in 28, in both those cases, how would you see gold, physical gold, charting through from now to 28? And
Well, as I said, I think that at some point in the coming months, we do have a nice correction. And that correction should be bought because we should see in this 27, 28 period, gold, if not at 5,000, very close to it.
I hear that longer term 5,000 figure consistently from, in my judgment, the best of the best out there, include you, of course. But I've got a
Thank you.
series. I've got a series of people. I mean, I've done this my whole corporate career as well. You spot the kind of the best. They're not always correct. No one is. But you spot the half dozen best people and you bias towards keeping an eye on what they're saying, while also, of course, looking at the broader opinion and continually integrating. But yes, that 5,000 figure and sometimes beyond it is the most consistent thing in the multi-year view for physical gold. So I don't know, Simon, whether if people now, especially people who have significant net worth or significant pension even that's in the funds and markets, if they don't have physical gold, it just seems stunning to me to not have a significant percentage in physical gold. But I guess either now hedge and get on that train, or potentially if you're more of a player, get ready to get on it, but potentially speculate on the correction that may happen and then trigger. But either way, getting physical gold in the coming period it's just such a no-brainer for me, especially with the BIS, Bank of International Settlements, in 2019, quietly moving it from 2B up to Tier 1 liquid asset alongside the only other Tier 1 asset in the world, the dollar. And the
You
central
mean
banks piling up.
was the only other tier one asset? I'm joking, the dollar.
Yeah. Well, I guess the BIS, they couldn't take the dollar out politically, so
No,
they could just
it'd be
leave it there.
impossible.
But they moved up the gold. And then the central banks piling up. I mean, I always say to people, look at the bad guys. They're the guys at the top of the heap. If you ever want to plan anything, watch what they're doing. I mean, God Almighty, I got in big in 2020 when I realized the central banks were amassing like hell. So yeah, what do you think then for people, ordinary people, particularly if it got a decent amount of worth you want to protect? Of course, if someone has very little, that's different. We're speaking to people who want to protect their wealth, as Matt Piepenburg would say. What would you be thinking in the coming months and years in physical gold terms?
On all corrections, buy gold and hold it, but buy physical gold and be careful where you hold that physical gold.
Yeah, I mean, storage. I've got the followers deal with Pure Gold, so there's a free storage period involved and free consultation. But to be honest, a lot of people would consider, getting shipment, which Pure Gold also do, secure shipment. And obviously that's your business because you need to store that safely yourself and obviously not tell anyone. But yeah, it's a good extra point to add in, safe storage, because regions in the world, I guess Switzerland is probably not a bad place in the vaults. My pension gold, some of it's there.
Yeah, Dubai is
Switzerland,
pretty good.
Dubai is pretty
Oh,
good.
yeah, it's a big, big, big market.
Yeah. But again, some people will want to, because it's a long term, ultra valuable asset, but it's long term, you can actually put it somewhere very safe, even if it's not overly convenient to dip into it, because it's just not that kind of asset. I always think in 10 years' time, perhaps, or in an ideal world, I keep working like hell, like I always do, and eventually that physical would go to my children. Ideally, I'd never be tapping into it, I guess.
Yep.
There you are. Well, excellent, Simon, and I want to respect your time. Any other last thoughts on the looming future that's coming at us, just to wrap it up?
I think the best I can say is trade the cycles. In equities, trade the cycles.
Yeah. And for lay people, maybe who won't get into that, there's a couple of options. You either do what I do and find the best half dozen and follow their lead. Um, but if you're not going to get into really getting knowledgeable about the markets, in these times, you tend towards a safe kind of position. So I guess physical gold and kind of, cash, but with interest. And yeah, I guess there's some funds. What stocks in the equities market, just to close on that,
No,
what
I
kinds of,
don't. Sorry.
ah, yeah, no,
I
and
steer clear of that.
I wasn't asking for tips. I was just occurred to me what kind of general sectors would be less prone to getting burnt, let's say, over the coming
Well, I
period.
think in general terms, you look for companies that have got very strong balance sheets that who can survive the downturns. That's should be the primary focus.
Yeah, great cash flow, super balance sheet, solid as a rock. And if you don't have expertise in these matters, I guess again you're back to find the best people out there who have been most consistently correct and maybe derive some guidance from them.
Yeah, yeah.
Excellent, Simon. Thanks so much. And we'll
Great.
circle back.
Pleasure.
Yeah, always is.
Thank you.
Privilege. Thank you,
Cheers.
Simon.
Bye.
Bye. That'll do it, folks. Always love talking to Simon. He's a fantastic guy, huge experience. And as mentioned, I have a followers deal with Pure Gold, free consultation, and also a storage period for free, though many people want to take physical possession. Be careful though, guys. And of course, whatever you decide, just I would suggest be thinking about it, have a discussion with the guys, whether you want to speculate or what I do is dollar cost average, move in pieces over time. So if there's movement, which there will be up and down in the market of gold, physical gold, though it's been all up basically for the last few years, if you dollar cost average and move in chunks on regular intervals, you smooth out that whole curve. But in my mind, and Simon's and all the best guys that I've been listening to and networking with in the wider business, the true experts, no question but heading towards 5,000 pretty much in the coming years. So it's the safest possible way to lock in and protect your wealth or your family's wealth. So anyway, whatever you decide to do, very best of luck with it.